Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, football fans of all ages. It is time once again for a live edition, fingers crossed, of Syracuse Sports. Brent, Emily, Leiker. We're live for now, we hope. If you were very patient with us on Monday's podcast, we had some internet gremlins. I don't think Elon Musk is interviewing any former presidents on the internet tonight, so that might help our cause a little bit here. But we appreciate your patience through our technical problems yesterday. We recorded the pod and put it out there, and a lot of you found it and watched it and listened to it. So thank you for that. We really appreciate that. Coming up today, we're going to recap today's practice. We are going to hear from my guy, Yasin Willis, and the Willis family, big fans of the pod, apparently, which is great to hear. We're going to hear from Zeed Haynes, who's getting a lot of buzz in camp, and quarterbacks coach Nunzio Campanile as well. And we're going to hear from a few of our Syracuse Sports Insiders as well, which we can do anytime on the pod. And whenever you want to text Emily and I, Chris, whatever you want to know about Syracuse football, your thoughts, your questions, your opinions, what you want us to ask players and coaches, what you want us to look out for at practice. We send you texts every day as a Syracuse Sports Insider. Best way to sign up if you haven't already, and thanks to everybody that has, and a lot of you are on the trial subscription right now, which is free for 2 weeks. All you do is text the word orange to 315-847-3895. As noted, it is free for 2 weeks, and it's just $3.99 a month after that. No better time to be a Syracuse Sports Insider than right here, right now, as the great Marv Levy used to say. The 99-year-old former head coach of the Buffalo Bills, who just celebrated a birthday recently. So happy birthday, Marv. Emily, we're back at it today, and we got a shorter window of practice than usual, but still jammed a lot into that period of time. What were you looking out for? What'd you see today?
Yeah, like you just said, it was shorter, and it didn't really have one position group I was looking at today. I was kind of just taking a day to look at everyone as much as we could. It was a day that we got a team period, which is always exciting, right? Getting to see kind of the whole team in action. So a couple notes from that. I will say, to start, Carlos Del Rio Wilson was repping with the twos today.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we kind of said when I hit publish on that story about Michael Johnson Jr. being the leading candidate, which we still believe he is, and like he has shown more, but we joked among ourselves, like tomorrow Carlos is going to be back with the number twos, and
that's
indeed he was. But that competition's ongoing. Obviously, we asked Nunzio about it, and that's what he said too, is that it's still ongoing and they're still impressing him, and he's seen everyone make strides. So they're playing that pretty close to the belt until we get closer to the season, and we'll see what they do with the depth chart. But figured I'd mention that. I noted that it was Clarence Lewis and Marcellus Barnes out there with the repping ones at the cornerback positions. So that was certainly interesting. Grant and then Bellamy were then in with the twos. And, sometimes they do mix and match guys in, just because, right, like you come in and sometimes you do have to play with the ones, even though you're a 2 or a 3 or whatever. So still not like entirely sure, like if that means Marcellus is going to be a starter, is like pushing for a starting role, or if that's just a depth chart thing. Let's see, what else did we see? Number 27. Oh, I meant to look. Whichever running back is number 27. Let's see. I have my Jordan Montanez, who must be a walk-on freshman. He was like he had the last carry in that team period drill. So we were on like the third team offense by this point. But he had a nice rep carrying the ball, broke a couple of hits, and then finished his rep all the way to the end, which is obviously something football coaches always hound players to do, is finish the rep. And he took it all the way down to the end zone. So I wrote that down. But yeah, it was a pretty standard day of fast break. That's what they call that team period. But just like kind of, we're getting to that point in practice where it's just like very slight things that change and that we see differently, and maybe get some insight into.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we're so close yet so far away. We're not quite in game week yet, but they're kind of in the throes of camp. And we talked about the All-Access show last night, and that breaks things up a little bit. And much quieter day of practice today. No ACC network crew. The cameras were still there that are documenting the All-Access program, right? Which is also interesting to me. There hasn't been a ton of visitors at practice. We've seen some people, but nowhere near what we saw in the spring. And there's a number of reasons for that. It's summertime and just kind of a different feel. And yeah, I think we're going to see some more visitors the closer we get to game week, when people get back on campus and things of that nature. But watching those drills, the quarterback competition, Nunzio did kind of keep it close to the vest, if you will, about, you know, who's in the lead or who's not in the lead. And both he and Fran have said the same thing. Like, we're just seeing who grabs this thing. But MJ Jr., Michael Johnson Jr., there was one play, he got the third team reps today, and he showed, if I can make up a word, his escapability, right? Play breaks down. He could just take off and run. I think he's a little quicker than Carlos. I think he recognizes that. Remember, when they brought him in, they described him as a weapon. That's how he was used. He was a quarterback, kind of became, going back to the Cordell Stewart slash days, if you remember that, a weapon. And now he's back a quarterback full time, and it's kind of getting back on that horse a little bit. So we saw that today. I sent some video to our Syracuse Sports Insiders. Two things that jumped out to me. I was watching a drill between Fidel Diggs and King Joseph Edwards, the young freshman that's got a lot of Syracuse fans' attention. And Nick Williams, per what we were talking about, the point of camp we're at, the coaches have to jump in a little bit more and be like, come on, let's go. And there was some colorful language. This is the internet, but I won't say what Coach Williams was saying to those two. And then I focused on Fran Brown a little bit, who was with his cornerbacks, which is, you know, if you don't know where Fran is at practice, he was most likely with the corners. He was encouraging, I'll put it that way. If you have the video as a Syracuse Sports Insider, you've seen it. Marcellus Barnes Jr., right? As much as he's shown at practice and shown that he can hang with the ones, certain techniques, finishing the drill, going through it. I can't remember who it was today. I think it might have been Yasin, who we were talking to after practice, and he said, you can't walk. Like, don't walk to drills. It's that constant push. Everything moves faster. But we kind of are in the dog days of camp now, and the coaches maybe have to lean on these guys a little bit. The weather's not too hot in central New York right now, thankfully, so that's not the cause of it. It's just kind of getting into the monotony of camp a little bit here. So those were a couple things that jumped out to me. Injury updates. So there were a couple more guys on the bike today. Justice Ross Simmons continues to be on the bike. Fran Brown did tell us yesterday that he expects him back at practice this week. He has a little bit of a hamstring issue, but he expects him back. Joining him out there was Jalen Hornsby, Lysander Malello, offensive lineman, and Marvin Washington Jr. as well. From what we're not doctors, we just play one on a podcast, Emily. What I could see, it didn't seem to be anything serious. But when you're on the bike, and you don't necessarily have to have the non-contact black jersey on, as Dan Villari once again had today, and we've been told that's not serious as well. It's just precautionary, and you know they're taking it easy with whatever he's going through right now. If you're on the bike, typically you're not a full participant in practice, and you know they're being cautious about some things. So we'll keep our eye on that. But yesterday, it was just Justice Ross Simmons out there, along with Braylon Ingram, who we know is out with his injury situation. But that room is a little crowded, if you will, today. So it's camp, and bumps and bruises are piling up.
Right, and when we go back on Thursday, likely all of those guys will be back, or at least several of them will be back in that. So like those types of things, I know it can be like alarming to hear, but I unless we are seeing a guy repetitively on there, like it doesn't really, like we take notes every day on it so that I can be like, oh, this guy has been on a bike 4 practices in a row that we've seen. But like, if it's not like a multiple day thing where they're seen on the bike, I honestly don't pay it too much mind, because it's not.
And they like to, I'm not saying they're trying to trick us, but those guys are out there with their helmet and shoulder pads too. Yeah. That's if like, you know, they're out there, they're on the bike, they're kind of in uniform, but they're not going through the full drills at practice. Our colleague, Chris Carlson, to change gears a little bit here, guys, and talk about how a key spot on the offensive line is coming into play here. Our colleague, Chris Carlson, is going to be writing about this, so we don't want to spoil the story entirely here. But Demetrius Weatherspoon met with, he was at the podium, if you will, today. So when we do interviews, sometimes it's just one-on-one. Other times guys will go in front of the podium, if you will, the backdrop, and, you know, you're talking to 8, 9, 10 members of the media, right? So Big Spoon got the big spotlight today, and it's coming into focus here, Emily, that Big Spoon is going to be the left tackle, the blindside protection for Kyle McCord And you're talking about a guy who comes to Syracuse from Howard. You have transfers from Texas A&M, Ohio State, Alabama. You're coming from Howard, you're going to get some more arched eyebrows looking your way saying, can you hold your own here? And it seems that Big Spoon is more than doing that and has moved into a prominent spot on the offensive line. And when we say Big Spoon, all 6'7", 330 pounds of Big Spoon on one side, and Colorado transfer Savion Washington, all 6'8", 340 pounds of him on one side. So Red asked this question, one of our Syracuse Sports Insiders, wondering your thoughts on how the staff is planning to protect McCord and get him through the season in one piece. Well, that's one way, Red. When you put those two guys as your bookends, that's a good start.
Yeah, I mean, bringing in all of the offensive linemen that they did this offseason, but particularly those two, and putting them at those outside spots, I mean, that is the plan to protect Kyle, is they got big bodies who are going to work the outside and keep people from coming around those corners, keep edge rushers from coming around that outside and hitting him when he's down. And, like we had thought maybe Savion would be over at that left side just because he's a little bit taller, but he played right tackle at Colorado last year, had decent grades there. Obviously, I've covered how he kind of battled an injury there and had some stuff going on, but both of those guys, I mean, kind of are rocks on this O-line right now. And then in the middle, you have returners. And so, like, honestly, like, I think this is probably the most confident I've felt in a Syracuse O-line the entire time I've covered this team. Like, it just feels like a very sound, solid O-line. I think the interesting part about Weatherspoon, besides being the Howard transfer and stuff, and Chris will get into this more in his piece, but I believe, I wasn't over there, but this is how Chris recounted it, that he told someone, either Williams or Brown, I want the left tackle spot. So he went in with that confidence. And, like, I think that's a position where you have to have that level of confidence to be like, I'm going to be the guy here. Like, you have to understand how important that role is for any quarterback you're protecting, but also for a quarterback, like, especially for a quarterback who has the stature of Kyle McCord and who is, like, kind of a hinge for this entire team.
It's the old adage, Emily, you can't teach size. Howard, Syracuse, no matter where you're at, you can hold your own on that offensive line. And apparently he has. He's had some battles with Diggs and some guys on defense, and he has earned the respect of this team in camp. I mean, Washington, I don't think really had to, because that is a mammoth human being who walks in and could dominate wherever he plays. And he was at Colorado last year, so he didn't necessarily have to make that step up. But, when you're talking about the left tackle, it's a very important position, no matter how big you are, no matter where you came from. Can you play? If you're talking about a transfer quarterback from Howard or even a running back, there's just going to be more scrutiny there. That's what we kind of have to deal with in the transfer portal, Emily. And see, you go through this process in the offseason, and when these guys come in, and what you're going to hear, you're going to see the highlight tapes. They don't put, missed blocks and your bad tape on those highlight tapes. You're going to see size. They're going to accentuate the positives, right? That's what we're going to look for. We try to find the full story on these things, but the initial reports are going to be, okay, here's my highlight tape, and here's how, and you look at it, and the size is the thing that jumps out to you, but can you play at this level? And it varies on what the positions are, right? So There was some scrutiny there, but I think even here on August 13th, we're still a couple weeks away from the first game through camp, and what we're discussing here, I think Spoon has pretty much put aside any doubts that he can hang. We'll see when they suit up and get out there for real, but he's proven among some guys that have proven themselves at this level that he can hang.
Yeah, well, to that point, I pulled up his Pro Football Focus grades. 78.5 overall offense. 81.8% pass block, 73.7% run block. Now, obviously playing at a different level of football, but that is significantly higher than any member of Syracuse's O-line last year. Significantly higher. Like, I'm trying to remember who was the top off of last year's, but that feels like at least 7% higher on all of those categories than the top players last year. And, Savion was also above most of the team last year at the O-line. So both of those guys are really talented beyond just their size.
While we're on the offensive discussion here, today was a day to talk to offensive players. We talked with Big Spoon. You're going to hear a couple more sound bites from some guys we caught up with today. But Nunzio Campanile had his turn in the spotlight here for the fall. And, of course, he's got a very interesting quarterback room right now from Kyle McCord, who, as Nunzio says here, is basically another assistant coach.
You know, it's really a great point. I mean, he is like talking to another coach. You know, like the conversations that we have are way more lined up in, you know, how do you see this? You know, how does this, like, we're not trying to tell him, hey, this is how it is. Now, certain things, obviously, hey, this is what we're doing. But there's always, because of his experience, his preparation, you know, that gets added into the way that I coach him all the time, the way that Coach Nixon coaches him, the way that Coach Rand coaches him. So I think it's really important that he feels comfortable in doing everything that we do. And, you know, he is like having another coach around.
So you got a guy who's another coach, an established veteran. You have a backup quarterback battle going on between Carlos Del Rio Wilson and Michael Johnson Jr. that we discussed. And you got a freshman in Jakari Williams, who they have high praise for. They like a lot. But that's something, I don't have the clip here, but that's something I asked Coach Nuns about today. Like, you know, how do you approach this when you have McCord, who's been around the block a few times, and a freshman? And I saw Coach Campanile. I've seen this a few times, Emily. When we walk in for practice, for interviews, practice is usually just kind of wrapping up. And I always like to look like who's staying after, what conversations are taking place. Jakari is always talking to Coach Campanile at the end of practice. So he's making sure to get those extra conversations and reps in with the youngster here as he gets up to speed.
Well, and one thing about like the different teaching and like kind of the use that I noticed today, and I know we've had internal conversations about it. I don't think we've talked about it on the pod, but like one thing they have done several times in practice is they will separate the top four quarterbacks. So McCord, CDRW, MJ Jr., and Jakari, and then their two walk-ons, and have them run separate drills with separate people. So like the top four will be over with the wide receivers, and then like those two walk-ons, AJ Miller and Pat Gresser, will be over tossing to the running backs and doing handoffs with the running backs, and having the running backs work against the DBs with the wide receivers blocking and stuff like that. And I mean, that is like a beyond like health and game reason to have a deeper football team, is that you can do so much more and work so many more things when you have a deeper football team. And obviously, like, AJ and Pat don't need to be doing all of the drills that McCord and those other three guys are doing right now, because they're not at that level. They're going to be more like practice players and stuff like that, at least for these first couple years. Like, who knows what they can grow into. But I thought that was something interesting that I was reminded of today when we saw one of those drills, exactly, where they split them up and they had Pat and AJ toss them to the running backs and the wide receivers block in and stuff like that. I think the quarterbacks were with the offensive line, and the tight ends is what that division was. I think I said wide receivers originally.
Well, and we would expect the All-Access show to focus on whoever the quarterback is. The quarterback's always going to get the brightest spotlight, but being that it's an Ohio State transfer and what Kyle McCord brings to the table. But I was really struck by that, and we mentioned this a little bit in our review, but how Fran would challenge Kyle McCord. Look at him. You're going to lead this team. Are you going to be like Little League Kyle? You're going to use your legs. And they just kept panning back to McCord. And we got to hear a lot of the little things that he said to players. You mentioned it on last night's pod. He was talking to Trevor Pena about, like, little things become big things. If you know where your angles are, what the routes are, to hear Nunzio back it up there. They said this in the spring, but you wanted to give Kyle a little bit of a leash to get on his feet, get some reps in, get some chemistry built with these receivers. That's something that Zeed Haynes told us today, Emily, that how did you get on the same page with Kyle McCord? They did a lot of work on their own.
It's gotten a lot better. We actually took a lot of time off the field, to keep working, get extra passes in, going over things like the playbook. So just over time from the spring to now, we got a lot closer, and, it's showing out on the field now.
So we got to say this. They're trying, I think, to throw a wet blanket on the Zeed Haynes hype.
Right.
Keep trying. Keep trying, because it's not going to work. Look,
right.
This guy is standing out. When we talked to Deion Wilson Jr. yesterday, the Tank, I said, who is giving you the most headaches in practice? And immediately Tank said, oh, that's easy. It's Kyle McCord and Zeed Haynes. right? Just when you think you get to McCord, it gets rid of the ball, and there goes Zeed Haynes the other way. He's making plays. Now, being right next to him today, Emily, I think what they've got to be careful about is he's still a young player, and he is 170 pounds. I keep using this reference, but I'll use it again. Soaking wet. Like he's got to build his frame a little bit. So Zeed's not going to be an every down receiver. He's going to, when you need a first down, they're going to take shots with him. They're going to get him the ball. If you've played the EA Sports college football game, I know Emily recently picked it up. Zeed's got a great speed rating on that game. And I was like, well, who cares? It's a game. It's like, no, these things can be pretty darn accurate sometimes. Zeed Haynes, sorry. You can't keep the secret anymore. This kid's going to get the football, and he is going to be a big-time player in this offense. Yeah,
for sure. What was it? Like Fran, as he was walking away from his little scrum yesterday, was like, I'm not going to say Zeed's name, but was joking with us about not wanting to shout him out in the wide receiver group. But Cat's been out of the bag on that one since spring. We've known that he's going to be a top target. So it's funny that they're trying to downplay that now in hope of, I don't know, hoping opponents don't recognize that Zeed Haynes is on the roster. I don't know.
We can't keep that under our lid anymore. A wide receiver that got some attention on the All-Access show, I got some questions from our insiders. I sent our insiders a note because Fran brought it up yesterday. Now, you have to decipher through the coach speak a little bit here, but I think Fran was pretty genuine. He said, look, Emmanuel Ross has been more, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it's basically he has impressed me. He has done more as a freshman than you would think. And then we watched the show. And look, these things are edited very carefully and very deliberately. Keep that in mind. So take it with a grain of salt. But he made some impressive catches. It's a deep receiver room. He's going to have to fight his way in there, but he's made enough of a name for himself where people are like, hey, what's up with this kid? And in certain situations, there's not a lot of games on the schedule where I think Syracuse is going to build up. Certainly Ohio, you would expect them to build up enough of a lead where maybe you can incorporate some younger guys. But then you got Georgia Tech. You got an ACC game against Stanford on a Friday night. I know Stanford's been picked to finish last in the league, but that's a league opponent. You don't take anybody for granted. Holy Cross game, that could be an Emmanuel Ross, young guy showcase type of thing. And then it goes UNLV into NC State into, the meat of your conference schedule. So we'll get moments here where you might see guys like that. But you got to be careful too, Emily. Like the Zeed Haynes hype, I believe every word of it. Some other guys that are peaking in camp, worth noting, but I need to see a little bit more. But, good for him that he stepped in as a freshman and has impressed.
Yeah, I mean, with everything at camp, camp's a controlled environment, right? So you take everything you see at camp with a grain of salt, particularly when it comes to flashy catches and really outstanding plays and high numbers of interceptions, which we've heard about. They're not hitting for the most part. They do in their scrimmages, and there are occasional drills. Clarence Lewis tackled LeQuint today. I think it was kind of an accident, but he took him down in one drill. And so yes, we sometimes get to see that freshman just made that crazy play, and it's okay. Well, then we have to remember that, how is that freshman mentally going to react in a game where he's going against an opponent and not his teammate? And would he be able to make that play in that scenario? And, some of them are at that level already, especially those that have been around since January. And some of them, it takes a little bit longer to get there. But certainly, I think those games you mentioned, we have potential to see some flashes from them.
We've saved the best for last, Emily, because today I got to meet my friend, Yasin Willis. And I'm here to report that my man crush on Yasin Willis has only grown exponentially. Shout out to the Willis family, by the way. Big fans of the pod. Appreciate that. Appreciate everybody watching and listening here. And it was just a pleasure to catch up with him. And not just because I've been hyping him up and what I've been impressed with and seeing him. He was just a delight to talk to. He had some really insightful answers about his process, why he decided to come to Syracuse. We're going to play a couple sound bites here shortly, including this. This was my intro with young Mr. Willis.
How's it going, man? Brent, Ax, what's up?
How are you, man?
I've been waiting to meet you.
Have you?
Yeah,
That's great.
My dad talks about you all the time.
Does he really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I've been talking about you a little bit. So your
Yeah,
dad probably
he be asking me, he'd be like, hey, was Ax there? Brent Ax? I'm like, nah, I ain't see him today.
Shout out to the Willis family.
It's 2 for 2 in the past week with shout outs, crazy stuff.
Let's go. Come on. You're welcome, Fran. We're just doing our part here. So it was fun to meet him and talk to him. Look, he's getting on the field. I think you're going to hear that in one of the bites I'm going to play here. You had a chance, though, to talk with Will Nixon, who's Jeff Nixon's son. So you have Michael Johnson Jr., and you have Will Nixon, who's the son of Jeff Nixon. So you have a couple sons of coaches that are out there today. I think he's working his way into the rotation here. LeQuint is clearly the guy, and he's getting the bulk of the carries here. But Willis and it feels like Nixon are knocking loudly on the door, and they're going to play.
Yeah, well, last week, Brent, was another thing that you weren't around for, but so I'll mention it again, is Nixon said they're going to play up to 4 running backs. Like, all of those guys are going to get attention, and I think Jaden Hart's kind of the fourth in the mix there who might get some action. You know, I did ask Will, I was like, does it seem like there are certain roles and like certain scenarios that are emerging where each of you will kind of be used? And he said they're not quite there yet. But certainly like he sees it moving towards a place where it's like, okay, like Will's the third down back, or like Will's going to come in this scenario and Yasin's going to come in this scenario. And so that'll be interesting to see how that plays out and kind of what their niches are in terms of their jobs and stuff like that. But yeah, Will was a great conversation to have as well. You know, similar to Michael Johnson Jr., who I talked to last week. He said his dad kind of stepped back in terms of his commitment. He's a kid that has known Fran for a long time, from back when Fran was at Baylor. He said that he was actually playing, he was in 9th grade at the time and playing cornerback. So he got some coaching then from Fran on being a cornerback, and obviously he's switched since then. But yeah, that running back room, it's going to be electric this year, I think, Brent.
Thunder and lightning, baby. And it goes back to that question we highlighted from Red earlier. How are you going to protect McCord? Well, you run the football, too. It's not just what you build on the offensive line to protect the quarterback. If you can establish the run and keep running the ball, Jeff Nixon spends most of his time with the running backs at practice, and it was the running back coach, keep in mind, in the National Football League, has a real affinity and a real insight into that position. They want to run the football. As much as we're talking about pro-style offense and McCord and all the receivers that deservedly are getting the attention and the hype behind them, Syracuse is going to ground and pound a little bit here, including with Yasin, who said this about what he's been learning from LeQuint. So football and off the field.
Yeah, on and off the field, he's a big role model. You know, he's like another brother to me that I never really had. You know, me and him are kind of alike, especially on the field. Both dogs, both run hard. It's just I'm a little bigger than him. But he's explosive. He's an explosive player. But he taught me a lot coming in, just how to take responsibility, ownership, do what you're supposed to do on and off the field. He's been a good role model.
One more from Yasin Willis here, just his impressions and things that Fran Brown has specifically taught him at camp.
Just little things like making sure I'm staying focused with my footwork, ball security, hitting a hole like I want to, lowering my shoulder when needed, when not to, when to use certain moves. Guiding me through it, just making sure I'm not getting too overwhelmed about the road that I got to play, because he told me, like, I'll be in pretty early. I'm going to play a big role of this team, so it's just that maturity. That's where the maturity comes in, and I just got to step up. So.
There it is. He's going to get on the field. And, Emily, some freshmen we noted have made an impact. You can get through the spring, which both Yasin and Marcellus Barnes Jr. on the defensive side did. It's such a huge jump for these guys. And let's keep in mind, we're in the dog days of camp. Game week comes the first week of school. Hey, remember that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they got to go to college. So that game week is if you're young Mr. Willis, you're going to class. You're really getting used to what it's like in college. That's a lot to put on somebody's plate in the first week, especially for someone who just said he's being expected to play and is going to get out there. But they're also mindful of, like, they're going to dump a lot on their plate when they're trying to game plan for Ohio and also get used to being a college student.
Yeah, definitely. Like, again, with all the freshmen, like from the ones who we think are going to play a lot to the ones who will not even see the field in those easy games, like year one is a massive adjustment. You hear it from every college coach you talk to. You hear it from every high school coach you talk to. Like, the high school game and the college game are just completely different from each other. Like, there are just so many different elements to the college game. Like, the speed of the game is so much increased. The physicality of the game is so much increased. So there's always an adjustment period. So I think, right, too, you give some of those guys grace. Like Yasin is gonna make some errors. He's gonna have some mess ups when he goes in. It's because he's a freshman. That doesn't mean he's not a good player or that he's not going to be phenomenal. But
you know what, though, Emily, the margin of error goes down significantly when you can just run over people, which is what he's going to do on the field, right?
Right.
Just to close, we did our review of the All-Access show last night. So we asked a few guys today, like, did you watch the show? They said they got to see a little bit of it because they did have meetings. Remember, the show was on at like 7 o'clock and 7:30 last night, but they've got meetings after practice and everything. But they did sneak a peek a little bit. And I asked a couple of guys too, like, the cameras are around, right? Does that sharpen your game? Does that, the camera doesn't lie. What are they seeing there? So Zeed Haynes is like, I don't want to know if the camera's on me. It makes me nervous. Yasin said pretty much the same thing. And we asked Coach Campanile about the extra set of eyes that are around camp. Here's what he said.
It's really a great point. I mean, he is like talking.
Whoop. Sorry, wrong bite here.
Did not. It was pretty busy. So, but I'm sure a lot of I saw it on in the facility at some point, but we were in meetings and stuff. So
the camera doesn't lie, right? So does that help you as coaches that there's a lot of cameras around and these guys have to be on their game?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a camera on everything they do anyway. Right. So I guess that added part, probably adds a little higher level of, whatever expectation and scrutiny and all that stuff. So, gets everybody to, do the right thing. But I think we got a lot of good kids that want to do the right thing anyway. So, they're out there working really hard.
What a concept, Emily. I think the best soundbite has come from Coach Wright, though, who we talked to yesterday, when he said it's like 10 o'clock at night, you turn around, you're just getting a snack and trying to take a breather. Oh, there's a camera, right? Make sure there's no spinach in my teeth or anything. Like, it's just, you can't let your guard down or everybody could see it on the ACC network.
I did catch Nick Williams, defensive ends coach, coming over at the end of practice and going, "Can I take this off?" and ripping his mic out of his shirt and handing it to their spokesman. I'm assuming that was an ACC network mic. I guess it could have been Syracuse. Sometimes mics up guys, but I bet it was for that. So that was funny. They are playing along and understand the importance, but that doesn't mean it's not weird for a lot of these guys. For sure. A
little different, but
I will say too, not to tease off a tease that we got, but one of us is right about our like Hard Knocks-esque standout funny guy we heard today, right?
Okay. We made our predictions on Monday's pod, so if you want to go back and check that out about some suggestions we made of some characters that the cameras could follow around here. And I'm a sucker for these shows. I loved the New York Giants offseason Hard Knocks. Last week's debut with the Bears was really good. I'm definitely going to watch it tonight because the Bills were terrible in that game. They got preseason, they got blown out. But like, Hard Knocks has evolved, and I'm a sucker for that show. And like I said, the one thing that's missing from the ACC Network show is that voiceover that kind of transitions and really sets the mode and puts a chill up your spine. So, like I said, ACC Network, you know my number. I'm available. But there is kind of a formula to these things. There's certain things that fans are looking out for. And we brought it up last night. There's 2 more episodes to go. They're going to focus on McCord and Fran and certain storylines. But what are some of the other kind of unique things that they're going to find that maybe we don't get to see behind the scenes in the facility? Like we said, 5 o'clock in the morning, there's Fran working out, or things that just don't quite cross our radar. I'm curious to see what they do in that department in the next 2 episodes.
I'm telling you, I want to see the witching hour, like 2 a.m. We know they were there until 3 a.m. at least one night. Like, who were they there with at 3 a.m.? I want to know.
People want to know this stuff. Where are you ordering pizza and just all the little details there.
What are the late night snacks? And I noticed on the schedule today, because they have their schedule up on the TV in the lobby when we walk in Ensley. They have like a 9:30 snack. I want to know what's the evening snack for the players when they come into the facility at 9:30 or finish
Good
meetings.
question.
That's probably when they get done with meetings, would be my guess.
One more thing. There were some fire trucks called over to Manley Fieldhouse today. It was interesting. We were walking out of practice and
false alarm.
All of a sudden there's 5 fire trucks over at Manley. All good. False alarm. They went, they looked, everything was fine. So thankfully, nothing going on there. But I wonder if that will make all access next week. Who hit the fire alarm?
That was still mid-practice, so I doubt anyone even on the football team knows that
True.
that happened, because they
True.
were all still in practice, and we had just been we had just had our time ended and we're walked out like we are every day.
So thankfully, all was good there. So we've got one more pod this week. We do not have, it's close practice on Wednesday. Thursday, once again, we will be there and observing practice. It'll be a defensive player interview session once again. We're going to talk with cornerbacks coach Joe Schaefer as well. Our Syracuse Sports Insiders have been awesome with their questions, their comments, their opinions, what they want us to look for at practice and ask the players and coaches. Keep that coming. Sign up today. If you haven't become a Syracuse Sports Insider yet, it's so easy to do. Just text the word orange to 315-847-3895. 2 weeks free, and then it's just $3.99 a month after that to get direct text message access to us. I do want to plug this as well. Starting Monday, you are going to get a newsletter from the one and only Emily Leiker, who has taken over our Orange Football newsletter. So what do you got in the works for that, Emily, and how do people sign up?
Yeah, in season, it'll be looking back and giving you guys a little bit more from the weekend's game, just things maybe we didn't get to in stories or moments I thought were interesting and we didn't have the chance to expound on. A little bit of explanations and reasonings on my AP ballot will be in there week to week. And I look forward at the next opponent, and then some probably random tidbits. Hopefully I'll manage to throw in some pop culture stuff and maybe what movies I'm watching on the plane for away games and stuff like that. But should be a fun time. It will be very much it'll be more informal than like a standard article, and more like you're chatting like we do on this pod and stuff like that. So I don't have the link handy, but if you go to the syracuse.com website, there should be a newsletter tab, and then email newsletters tab on the syracuse.com website, and it's Inside Orange Football, free sign up.
There you go. By the way, your friend Uncle Brent does a newsletter once a week as well. Comes out Thursday mornings for syracuse.com subscribers. That's all orange sports and a little bit of what Emily said, some pop culture stuff and some fun things, and highlighting some of the best work we're doing on syracuse.com, covering all things orange sports. So we got you covered on the newsletter front as well. That's it for this edition of Syracuse Sports. They'll be back on Thursday night after practice and another Syracuse football interview opportunity. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to hearing from our Syracuse Sports Insiders. And thanks to everybody that checked out the pod here today. For now, for Emily Leiker, I'm Brent Axe. Shout out to the Willis family. We'll talk to you again next time.